Hello, welcome to another edition of IronEdge Insights. I'm Daniel and I'm joined by my colleague Christiaan, and we represent the business intelligence practice here at IronEdge. You may recognize us from another discussion we had 3 years ago about AI and how in its nascent abilities, they were impacting business intelligence practices. At that time, people were asking if AI would eventually replace business intelligence consultants. But today, the question is really becoming, how are BI professionals actually using AI? Well, we aim to answer that in part today while we discuss how AI has been integrated into our day-to-day workflow, leveraging things like standard AI chat and even some AI coding platforms, which have given a boost to our productivity from everything, including our Power BI development to data engineering, and even our project and client management. But before we dive deeper into all of that, I want to start with something I think even non-business intelligence personnel can relate to. Over the past few years, technical teams have been getting smaller and smaller, not even necessarily because of the looming specter of AI automation or the economy, AI shakeups, or just general downsizing. A lot of people who have previously had relative proximity to technical users are now being asked to assume technical roles and even maintain things like reports or business processes. This kind of shift can give a bit of whiplash to people who previously have little experience with the subject matter or technical applications as a whole. This is actually something that is super similar to what we do on the BI team, isn't it, Christiaan?
Correct. Yeah, and we see this often with either standalone teams or teams that have been deprecated through downsizing or just consolidation and mergers and acquisitions. And so as part of the BI team, that's really where we come in as either a staff aug or a completely standalone consultants to come in and basically take over existing reports, existing data infrastructure and architecture. And we do this in multiple ways here at IronEdge. So we either do, fixed scope projects, or more often we see this in the capacity of BI as a service, where we would come in and basically completely overhaul your data environment, starting from your data engineering and data architecture all the way to building Power BI reports and then ultimately publishing that out to your audiences. And we've also now been, to your point, we've been integrating a lot more AI recently, specifically through IronAI is what we've been using. And it's been a great help in terms of speeding up any like DAX, which is the Power BI measure writing language to basically aggregate data, but also just like quick data analysis or being able to tell a story, getting insights, and then also a bunch of obviously administrative type of tasks and workflows.
Speaking of the admin and administration workflows, I know that on our team, we've been working a lot on automating some of our sales process. We are the technical users, we are the customer service managers, we're the project managers, and even at sometimes we have to be some salespeople, right? So whenever we are asked to be part of that sales process, there's a lot of times where we have to take a lot of the technical details that we learned in a discovery call and turn that into a scope of work. Can you talk a little bit about how we've used IronAI to kind of boost our statement of work crafting, because that used to be a pretty long process for us.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's really when I first learned about IronAI, I was like, this is the one thing I absolutely have to fix, because if I have to sit there another 3.5 to 4 hours, combing through meeting transcripts, looking through a bunch of different emails, and then ultimately still, need to spend like 35 plus minutes combing through the template, filling in all the blanks, I was going to pull out my hair. So as soon as I got access to IronAI, the first thing I did was basically build a workflow, what they call workflow in the platform. And I'll talk about what IronAI is here in a second to give you more context. But essentially what I had to do is take the sales call transcript and I give it some additional context, specifically a BI sales questionnaire. And then it takes the information from the transcript, it takes the questionnaire, and then in the prompt, I ask it to basically highlight questions I may have missed so that I can then do follow-up with a client. But it takes all the information in the transcript and the questionnaire and essentially dumps it into the template that I also provide to the workflow. And ultimately, it pushes out a scope of work that I can then send to a client that's pretty much ready to go. Obviously, notwithstanding any questions I missed that may be critical pieces of information to have. But then I can take that and actually pass it off to the sales team to email for signature.
It's quite a lot of stuff that it does, actually. And I mean, you're not necessarily, the technical lead on the BI team, right? You do a lot of admin work, you do a lot of the behind the scenes work, as well as managing some of your own clients as well for Power BI development. In the context of building this entire process, since you're not a software engineer by any means, how did AI really speed up that process to create it for you?
So the platform is actually pretty neat. It has what we call like a workshop assistant, and so it's essentially the same way you would interact with ChatGPT or any of the other LLMs. So it's a chat box, and then you basically just tell it, hey, I want you to create this workflow using these inputs to get X, Y, and Z output. And then it'll actually go through, take all that information, all the files that you give it that you want as inputs, either as samples or as constant files, and then builds that specific, let's say I'm asking you for a workflow, then it'll actually build a workflow for me. Or if, let's say I want something called an app, if I want an app, it'll actually build that for me as well. And then I can just use it from there. So basically, it took me about less than 5 minutes of like, hey, I have this idea to, okay, now I have a workflow that I can actually test and
Wow, that's a lot of speed that you gained on that.
yeah, which is nice, right, for like non-technical users or not non-power users rather. When it comes to specifically LLMs or being able to automate processes in their day-to-day workflows or processes that they need to go through. And so the old adage that we kind of think about is, it's just co-intelligence every day for every single person at your organization. And that's really where we've seen a lot of gains for a lot of our clients too. Simple things like being able to have a routine, either email or meeting sent out, or it could be even as something as complex as, oh, I'm doing hardcore research about utilities across the states, and then finding compliance numbers for those utilities, conglomerating and combining all the data to then be able to determine if the utilities project is either a yes or a no in terms of partaking in that particular project, or whether or not you should bid on it. So it's really a wide spectrum, a lot that you can do with that to actually build out your either agents, apps, or workflows.
So a lot of the power from IronAI really comes from all of the tools that are available to it. I use a lot of my AI partnership goes through the form of GitHub Copilot inside of VS Code, which is a programming interface. But one thing that's really powerful is a lot of these AI chatbots now have the ability to leverage tools, being, desktop APIs, and even connect through a sort of pseudo API called an MCP server. From what I understand, IronAI has quite an extensive library of those MCP servers. I know you had just mentioned that IronAI can help people that are not necessarily power users like you empower themselves with things like research capabilities, or even start to creep towards some more effective technical processes. Mm-hmm. From my experience with IronAI, one thing that was really impressive to me is that it actually has its own Python interpreter. So not only can you ask the AI to help you work within something like an Excel spreadsheet, instead of kind of opening it up, trying to use computer vision to read the Excel file, it can actually save you on quite a lot of tokens out of the box if you turn on that Python interpreter, because it'll actually use Python code to read the file, act upon it, and then present you with results. And one thing that I want to make clear is that, a lot of people are struggling with context and tokens right now inside of their AI usage. A lot of people are having problems with their token usage in a lot of their enterprise solutions for AI and LLM access for their user base. There's everybody from you who is a power user being able to create things like workflows, apps. You over time, you have 3 years of experience working with AI at this point, and you know a little bit about context engineering, prompt engineering, and making sure that the token usage is lower than it could be with a lot of runaway conversations. Mm-hmm. We find ourselves in an environment right now where, with all of the economic load that is taking place on AI usage and the expansion, the significant runaway expense of a lot of the actual running of LLMs inside of the greater environment, a lot of the enterprise agreements that people get with things like Claude or ChatGPT, they all rely on per seat, attribution or mm-hmm. licensing for every one of their users. One cool thing about IronAI is that you don't necessarily have to pay the exact same amount for, your power users as you do for the people who are just starting out. It is a tenant-wide agreement for a specific amount of credits for the month. And credits are just, a calculation between the tokens per all of the LLMs that IronAI provides you, and it spreads it across your entire tenant. So your power users get to use as much as they would like, and the lower level users who are maybe using it to do a little bit of research also can pull from the same pool. It's a really flexible kind of licensing agreement. And one thing that I really want to make clear is that when it comes to context, it's something, or context and token usage, it's something that people really need to pay attention to. And one thing that I believe is super important is making sure that all of your tool sets don't necessarily run away with your token usage. And what I mean by this is you'll see a lot of things out in the AI hype beast news cycles where people are talking about all of the agents they've set up, all of the coordinator and orchestration agents they've set up. The problem with a lot of high level or really fancy or eye grabbing AI tools that people are putting out there online right now is that everything is coordinated by a specific agent. And so just as an example, if you built an agent to go to your Google Calendar and then go and create a list of things you need to do and then research how you would do those things, every single time one of those agents acts, it is coming up with a way to actually accomplish that task, creating some form of code or using one of those connections. And every step along the way in that process is actually leveraging and burning quite a lot of tokens. The thing that we at IronEdge believe is that you should use AI to really boost your development and create tools that aren't necessarily all powered by AI, but created by that AI to limit your token usage. And we have a lot of expertise at IronEdge to kind of show people the way in that regard. The way that I've been using AI in my workflows is actually GitHub Copilot, which is native inside of VS Code. It's kind of a power user's dream where people who regularly work with code or different types of files can open up a single window where there is a lot of chat space for people to go in and just use an LLM, have it work upon a code base, or have their same chat sessions and start to come up with some really cool tools. Most of the time, I really need a lot of help with my day-to-day where I'm validating our clients' data sets, where I need to make sure that all the data in this Excel file matches the data in this other Excel file. And where security comes in is I don't want the LLMs to read those CSVs on their own. So one thing that I really pay attention to is I come up with samples or anonymized data sets, and I actually use the AI to build me Python scripts, which can do that analysis for me. And now I have a tool in my toolkit where I can just do that exact same operation. The same process of validating two CSVs across from each other to make sure they have the same data in it would take me 10 to 20 minutes in some cases, and that's when I'm working really fast. Now that I have my Python script that I developed once, I point it to one Excel file and I point it to the other Excel file. It'll do the justification and tell me what rows exist in one or the other, and then I can then continue my investigation further. And it's something that's extremely powerful for my workflow.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a data analyst dream.
Yeah, really the goal is one day to build a data analyst toolkit where I can offer all of the small one-time use tools to data analysts out there who have the same problems that I do.
And all the time spent in the trenches.
Yes. I think it might be really useful if people start to get a handle on exactly what the difference is between standard AI chat LLM interfaces look like and how I'm using something like GitHub Copilot in my day-to-day workflows. It's been really important. And to be honest, I've started to train some of our users on how to use it. People who the most technical work they do is filtering and sorting inside of an Excel file have started to get their hands a little dirty with GitHub Copilot and VS Code. It's something that is free, open source, and it's pretty much free to start with the LLM capabilities. If you blow past that trial usage, you're probably well on your way to justifying the expense of the monthly cost of that. So I think we should get right into it, and I'll show you exactly how I use GitHub Copilot in my day-to-day workflows. This is VS Code, and it's offered by Microsoft. It is an open source platform that Microsoft has provided to a lot of technical users out in the business world. And effectively what it is, for those who know what an IDE is, it is an IDE, an interactive development environment. And all that means is I have a user interface in front of me where I can connect to a repository, or in better terms, a folder where a lot of my files exist. And on the left here, I have quite a few different extensions that allow me to just boost my productivity on any given day. This is the Explorer, where I can look at any one of my files in my repository. I have the ability to connect to SQL Server to actually work with databases and do SQL scripting in the application itself. GitHub Copilot actually helps quite a lot with SQL scripting and development, where I don't have to go line by line sometimes, and it'll just allow me to do some autofill. It's a really cool tool. There are also a lot of other extensions, things like source control for GitHub or other repositories like DevOps, and an entire extensions marketplace. However, the real magic happens right here on the right. This is the actual chat window where I would be able to interact with an LLM hosted through GitHub. And one thing that is super cool about this is it has its own agent mode. And what that means is it's not just a chat. The agent mode can actually interact with the repository that I've given it access to and generate code, create new projects, and review code for anything that might not be working. It has terminal access when you allow it to actually interact with PowerShell to either run Python or PowerShell or even any other coding language that you want to code with. I'll show you an example of how that works, but first I want to introduce a sort of use case for all of you. This is a sample report that I actually was able to kind of put together a little bit through the help of the AI chat assistant. However, going back to our conversation, I want to talk a little bit about how on the BI team, there are a lot of times where we inherit reports from our clients in situations where we don't know the specifics of how a report was put together, the business processes that generated the data, nor do we understand the data environment as a whole. And this is going to be something that a lot of people are starting to experience as technical teams start to shrink over time. And one thing that is really cool about being a Power BI developer in this age of AI is that my actual job can become a little bit easier by just leveraging the AI tools available inside of the agent mode inside of VS Code. So what I mean by that is Power BI actually has its own MCP. You'll see if you just search under here, I can search Power BI. There is a Power BI modeling MCP server, which I already have installed. The fact that I have this installed means that I can actually connect to several different Power BI services, whether it is actually Power BI in the cloud, whether it is a Fabric workspace, or I can actually connect to Power BI desktop. And this is going to be extremely crucial for people who are suddenly thrust upon owning a lot of Power BI reports. And what I mean by that is I can actually just type into my chat here, connect to, and I'll go and pull my report name, Tech Talk Demo Report. You'll see that it is going to consider my request. And it's actually setting up the Power BI connection flow so it can connect to the requested model. Okay. So after it did a little bit of thinking, the LLM was actually able to, after a little bit of searching, find my Power BI report that I had open on Power BI desktop, and it connected to the Power BI report and was able to connect to the actual model underlying the report. So this entire data set is now visible to the LLM. I'm going to do something simple really quick, and I'm just going to ask it to describe the main table in my report a little bit and tell me a bit about the measures that currently exist in the measure folder. As you can see, security is first, so it will always ask you if it can run specific operations and anything from connecting to the data set or running code in your session. So it's going to go ahead and pull some information from my Power BI report. And as you can see, it's now given me a description of some of the actual measures inside of my report. You can see that it found in order dollars year over year, where it calculates a year over year percentage change for order dollars comparing the current period to the same period last year. And it will also give me the definition of my previous year, where it goes back 2 years. It can summarize the full model structure, but I'm not going to do that right now. One thing I actually want to do right now is a pretty simple request, actually, So in my report, I'm just going to ask for a simple new measure. I just want it to create a new measure for me based on some requirements it may have gotten. And all I'm going to do is ask it to build a simple measure that provides me a total amount of sales based on a specific description of a product. Now it's asking me which quantity should be multiplied by sell price for the total sales amount. I'm just going to do the original quantity. And I only want to remove the style filter, which is true, and we'll submit that. LLM tools are extremely powerful in the sense that they can help you interact with these tools through the power of MCP servers and extensions. And further, there are so many others, including things like the Microsoft Learn extension that allows you to connect to Microsoft Learn and actually pull documents, work with the AI LLM to look at documentation and start to break down exactly how to work with some of these new systems. And one thing I want to show that's really cool about this process is the fact that this report was a report that was used in a few specific areas in real business. And you'll see that there's a lot of anonymized names here shown in each one of the descriptive locations of this report. And the reason why I needed to anonymize this data and basically jumble up all of the numbers is so that I can provide this demo to all of you. And one thing that was extremely cool about this entire process was I didn't even have to leave this window to do all of that update on its own. Under the docs, you'll find that I have an anonymization project goal. This was just a markdown file that I created to essentially pass over to the LLM, which then took the instructions listed in this project goal and built out an entire project that you see before you to actually anonymize the data by creating a mapping system, an entire Python script with all of the information needed to actually generate this new anonymized CSV. And all I had to do was provide the prompt to the LLM, and all of the magic went on from there. We worked together over the course of about 30 to 45 minutes. I was given an output that I replaced in the Power BI report, and voila, I had an anonymized data set right there using Python libraries that I didn't know existed before I started this process. So not only can you learn to become a better technical user, it's actually boosting my productivity as somebody who's been doing this for 8 years now. So if there's anything I can tell you right now is that for your technical user base, AI LLMs and technical chat tools are going to be very useful, but something like VS Code or Claude Code or any one of the other AI powered IDEs is going to give you a significant boost into learning to take ownership of all of your products and all of your new responsibilities as the tech landscape and personnel landscape changes over the coming years. All right. So with that, I was able to show you all a little bit about how I use VS Code and Copilot. The possibilities really are endless. And to be honest, I've really scratched the surface. I would say that I'm just starting to be an intermediate user of these LLM co-work IDE workspaces. There's so many things that can be done, and really you can operationalize the development within these tool sets. Now, One thing that really interests me, Christian, is, a lot of my technical down and dirty work takes place in GitHub Copilot. I know, for instance, you use a lot more of IronAI in the actual portal because it needs to be one portable for you. And you don't really have time to manage a lot of those extensive workspaces. I know that you don't have a lot of experience using GitHub Copilot or things like that because you don't have as much time to set up these workspaces, make sure that it's all set up correctly in a way to make the LLM work as it needs to. So in the context of IronAI, could you tell me a little bit about how it's helped you with the BI team operations, whether it's things like business analysis or how you work with our clients in more specific detail?
Yeah, no. So specifically with IronAI in context of the business intelligence team, usually when we end up working with a specific client and we inherit a bunch of work reports, we do what we call a data deep dive. And so that's really understanding what the data looks like, where the data is coming from, and what the current status of the reports are using that specific data. Now, it's still something where it's relatively manual still, but with IronAI, we can at least speed up a lot of parts of that specific process. So, for example, like in your demo, even with the agent mode in the Copilot, you were able to actually ask questions about your data and things like that. And so in a very similar capacity in IronAI, I can feed it, sample data from a specific existing report to then actually give me insights, give me pointers about potentially where erroneous or anomalous data points may be. And then that way I can actually reach out back to the client to understand what's going on with that. Sometimes that is those anomalies, maybe results of a process, or it could just be somebody fat fingering some data. So that's one way for us to kind of like speed it up. But then also in the context of one of the other avenues of work that we do on the BI team is training. And so an example would be, I just recently finished up with a client where we did a paired programming type of situation. And so again, I inherited their reports because of the specific security level that was needed to actually directly interact with the data. I was only provided sample data. And so I was able to actually leverage IronAI to build out a training program using the sample data, as well as some screenshots from the existing reports, as well as some understanding of the domain of work that the client is in, as well as some general processes for data acquisition to then be able to train end users on like, hey, these are the types of things you want to look at, working with their DBA to actually clean the data, set it up in a better way for specifically star schema data modeling and engineering so that we can reduce the number of tables that clients were bringing into a report, obviously causing huge file bloat and unnecessary duplication of data. And because of the way that they were connecting to the data, it was also slowing down not only their report, but actually clogging up the entire network because of the size and volume of data that was being live fed into the reports. And so there were ways that we were able to actually optimize it. And through that training kind of pair program situation, now those users have the ability to now teach others as well as implement it themselves instead of having us do that by hand with them. And again, really that whole training program was aided and set up by IronAI.
I know that it can be pretty difficult for people like us, the boots on the ground technical user, to really relate to a lot of people who are new to these subject matters. The general rule of thumb for a lot of tech organizations is to not even put people like us directly in front of the clients, but the way it works, we have a little bit better soft skills to be able to interact with people more so than other technical users. And really, we still sometimes end up with that problem where we take our knowledge for granted. And I think one thing that's been super useful to me is really take a beat, understand exactly what I'm trying to relate to a non-technical user. And through AI, I'm able to really break it down piece by piece, help them understand the core fundamental processes, and then also provide them with resources that the AI use to even understand the topic. So it's a really nice feedback loop overall.
Absolutely. It's always interesting because especially with a client that I have no domain knowledge about their industry, using just IronAI in kind of conjunction with understanding their data and potentially building out trainings, I learned so much more so I can actually understand the process that they go through to get to where they are. And then also understand why certain things may have been done in the past the way that it is. And then gives us an opportunity to come and actually clean house a little bit and help set them up for future proofing it a little.
So with all the talk of AI, we're really just scratching the surface. There's so many things that we could really dive into on a case by case basis. I mean, I could probably talk for an hour on just the extensions alone inside of VS Code. But if we really had to boil it down, I think a really important question for us would be, what's one piece of advice that we'd give to another BI professional who's just now starting to incorporate AI into their workflow? I'll let you start this off. Just give me an example of what you think would be the first step for somebody just starting.
Yeah, so mine's kind of one is a bit more conceptual and one is probably a bit more practical. But the first one is, as soon as you start using AI, at least from the context of Power BI data and being able to leverage, code and stuff like that, make sure that if it also goes a little bit hand in hand with automation, ultimately I'm just thinking a bit more upstream from reporting itself, where you may have to have like a repeat task over and over. And a lot of people that I've noticed, especially with IronAI and working with clients that use that, is that they tend to overcomplicate things when it really doesn't have to be, or they're trying to, build out a process or a flow that doesn't actually exist because it's not documented. So my first piece of advice would be like, one, if there's a process or a flow or a workflow or something that you want to make more efficient, make sure you document it, understand all the steps, and then ask yourself like, okay, do I need like 5 different apps in IronAI to achieve this? Or can I just achieve this with a simple agent, right? And then you can kind of build from there. So really for me, it's like, make sure that the process is documented and then, keeping it simple versus overcomplicated, because it's easy to get overwhelmed. And then on the other one is a bit more on the technical side, and that's specifically regarding prompt engineering. Like I would probably advise new users to specifically focus on prompt engineering, because especially if you're using it in the context of IronAI, because we do have, like we talked about earlier, a bunch of different MCP server connections working and touching and interacting with other third-party applications. And so learning how to prompt that properly and efficiently not only gets you better results, you get faster results, but also you're way more efficient with your tokens, because instead of putzing around for 5-6 chats or interactions, now you can basically like hammer down what you're exactly looking for and want to get out of that conversation in like 2 or 3, maybe even 2 or 1. So those are like the main things. And then obviously the more practical and the more high volume of like tasks that you're trying to bring into your workflow using AI, the better, because that's going to just boost your efficiency later.
I think you really hit the nail on the head with what us in the Roost community would call Aaron's Law, which is you can't automate a process that doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of that going on in people trying to work with AI. It's not a magic button. It's not a black box that can just do whatever you want. You do have to have a little bit of an idea of what you're trying to automate with these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and although like IronAI isn't a standalone automation tool, there are ways that you can connect that into like other apps like Roost, for example, or N8N. But that workflow that you're building out is technically, at least a portion of the automated process that you can run on like a specific schedule. So if you don't have that documented and that process doesn't actually exist, well, that's not really going anywhere. All right, Daniel. So now that I kind of showed you my cards, now it's your turn. What's one piece of advice you would give another BI professional that's just starting out in their AI journey in terms of like workflows?
For me, I would say that they should kind of identify a specific problem that they want to solve first. It's very similar to what you said, but if you are just trying to become a master of all the skills, leveraging AI in one day, that's not really going to work. For instance, for me, my entire goal when I first started out was the first problem I actually tried to solve is, what problem can I solve? Once I really did identify it, it was, how can I start to build a tool set where I can actually build out pieces of code that would allow me to make my job easier? Going back to what I had said before, there are so many times when I'm validating a specific data set for a client after I make a major change or ship a major feature, where I need to test and validate that all of the data is in the exact same shape as it was before. And the way I'm able to do that was by coming up with a pretty robust piece of Python code that allows me to just submit one Excel file and another one, regardless of the schemas, that basically says everything in the first one needs to match the second one. And I don't have to call out any specific columns. I don't have to call out any specific values. I was able to, through AI, identify that problem that I have, and over time, iterate on this specific Python code that allows me to accomplish that process. What used to take me up to 2 hours in some of the worst case scenarios now takes me about 15 minutes at most to come up with the issue, if there is one, and solve it. And without AI, that really wasn't a huge deal. But it all goes back to identifying the problem I needed to fix first, and then figure out how to solve that problem using AI. And the journey that I went on was I opened up VS Code, was curious about GitHub Copilot's integration, and just started testing out the features there. I was able to get Python installed more cleanly on my machine by talking to the AI, setting up virtual environments, and then starting to use best practices to develop code. And now I have a single workspace for each one of my clients, including IronEdge as a client. And I'm able to really organize my thoughts. So not only did my productivity rise in terms of what I could do in a certain amount of time, my productivity meta skills actually rose, where I can track work more easily and I can actually keep all of the documentation in one place. It's really sped up my workflows in terms of the actual work I do and keeping me a little bit more sane in tracking my time.
That's awesome. That's exactly going back to the adage reference earlier, where co-intelligence for every single person in the organization every day. And that's really, you're basically the poster child of that.
I hope to be one day. Well, I think that'll pretty much do it for us today. This has been our first Tech Talk in a few series. You'll see us a little bit more over the coming months. And next time, we're going to be talking a little bit about IronAI, diving more into the platform and talking about a few use cases that we use on a day-to-day basis. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.
See ya.